There's a particular kind of terror that successful people never talk about. Not the terror of failing. Everyone admits to that fear. That fear is acceptable, understandable, almost noble. No, this is a different terror. The terror that if you actually succeed, if you actually achieve what you say you want, everyone will finally see the truth. That you don't deserve it, that you got lucky, that you're not as capable as they thought, that you're a fraud who somehow managed to fool everyone, including yourself. And that exposure, that moment when the mask comes off and everyone sees you're not who they thought you were, that feels more terrifying than any failure ever could. Let me tell you about Sarah, not a composite character, not a made-up story. A real person whose journey through this terror will reveal something you need to see about yourself. Sarah was 37 years old when I met her. VP of product at a tech company you'd recognize. 6-figure salary, team of 20 reporting to her. By every external measure, successful, accomplished, someone who'd made it. But when Sarah sat down in my office for the first time, the first thing she said was, "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Not the job, the pretending." Sarah had spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, each promotion earned through competence, hard work, and genuine talent. But Sarah didn't see it that way. In her mind, each promotion was a fluke, a case of being in the right place at the right time, of the company not having better options, of her managing to hide her inadequacies just long enough to slip through to the next level. And now, as VP, she felt like she was one mistake away from everyone realizing she'd never belonged at any of these levels, that she'd been faking it the whole time, that the emperor had no clothes and someone was about to point it out. The interesting thing about Sarah's story is that it started long before she became VP. It started when she was 8 years old. Her older sister was the star of the family. Straight A's without trying. Athletic, popular, effortlessly excellent at everything. And Sarah, 2 years younger, was always being compared. Why can't you be more like your sister? Your sister never had to be asked twice. Your sister got it right the first time. And young Sarah internalized a belief that would shape the next 30 years of her life. She wasn't naturally talented like her sister. She had to work harder, try harder. And even then, she'd never quite measure up. She was always going to be the lesser version, the one who didn't quite belong in the same category. But here's what actually happened. Sarah did work harder. And because she worked harder, she often achieved more than her naturally talented sister. Sarah graduated top of her class in college. Her sister dropped out junior year. Sarah built a successful career. Her sister bounced between jobs. Sarah bought a house, got married, had stability. Her sister struggled with relationships and money. But Sarah never updated her core belief. She never looked at the objective evidence and thought, maybe I'm actually the more capable one. Maybe hard work and discipline matter more than natural talent. Maybe I've been underestimating myself for 3 decades. Instead, she looked at every achievement and thought, I just got lucky. I just worked harder to compensate for not being as good as her. If I was actually talented, it wouldn't have required so much effort. This is the foundation of imposter syndrome, not just feeling like a fraud despite evidence to the contrary, but having a core belief system established in childhood that interprets all evidence through a distorted lens. Sarah could win every award, exceed every expectation, outperform every peer, and her brain would still find a way to explain it that preserved her original belief. She's not actually capable. She's just good at hiding that she's not. And that belief, that fundamental sense that she doesn't really belong, it was running in the background of every decision, every interaction, every moment of her professional life. When Sarah got promoted to VP, something shifted. The previous promotions had been uncomfortable, but she'd managed to explain them away and settle in. But VP was different. VP meant visibility. It meant board meetings. It meant being in rooms with the CEO and other executives who were genuinely brilliant, who had pedigrees from top schools, who spoke with confidence about complex topics, who belonged in those rooms. And Sarah, sitting in her first board meeting, had this overwhelming sense that she was an imposter in a room full of real players. That any moment, someone would ask her a question she couldn't answer, and everyone would realize she didn't belong there. That first board meeting was on a Tuesday in March. Sarah prepared obsessively. She knew her material backwards and forwards. She anticipated every possible question. She rehearsed her presentation 40 times, and when the moment came, she delivered perfectly. Clear, confident, compelling. The CEO praised her work afterward. Multiple board members mentioned how impressed they were. It should have been a triumph, a moment of validation, proof that she did belong at this level. But as Sarah drove home that night, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt terrified because she'd set a standard. She'd performed at a level that created expectations, and now she'd have to maintain that, quarter after quarter, after meeting, and eventually, inevitably, she'd slip. She'd have an off day. She'd get a question she couldn't answer, and then everyone would see what she'd always known. That the first performance was a fluke, that she's not actually as capable as she appeared. This is success anxiety, and it's different from performance anxiety. Performance anxiety is the fear before you do the thing. Success anxiety is the fear after you've done it well. It's the dread that comes with achievement. The sense that every success raises the bar, increases the expectations, creates more distance to fall when you inevitably fail. For Sarah, every win felt like climbing higher on a ladder that was going to collapse. The higher she climbed, the harder the fall would be. So part of her brain, the protective part, started looking for ways to stop climbing, to plateau, to ensure she didn't get any higher, because higher meant more dangerous. 3 weeks after that successful board meeting, Sarah missed a deadline. Not a catastrophic miss, just submitted a report a day late, but it was uncharacteristic. Sarah never missed deadlines. She was known for being ahead of schedule. Her assistant, mentioning it in passing, said, "That's so unlike you. Are you okay?" And Sarah, instead of feeling bad about the miss, felt a strange sense of relief because the miss proved something, that she wasn't perfect, that the expectations could be adjusted, that maybe people would stop seeing her as the flawless executor and start seeing her as human, fallible, not someone to put on a pedestal. But here's what Sarah didn't realize in that moment. She just activated a pattern that her nervous system would now recognize as a solution to the problem of too high expectations. The pattern was simple: succeed, feel anxiety about maintaining the standard, make a mistake, feel relief when expectations lower, repeat. And over the next 3 months, Sarah repeated this pattern 7 times, each time in slightly different ways. A small error in a presentation, forgetting to follow up on an important email, being late to a meeting, losing track of an assignment. Each mistake small enough to be explained away, but collectively they started to create a picture. Sarah's not quite as sharp as we thought. Sarah's struggling with the VP role. Maybe the board meeting was a one-time thing. And here's the insidious part. Sarah didn't feel bad about this. She felt safer. The pressure was off. The expectations had lowered. She wasn't at risk of being exposed as a fraud because she'd already exposed herself as imperfect, as human, as someone who makes mistakes. The paradox was complete. Sarah had spent her career working obsessively to prove she belonged. But the moment she proved it definitively, the moment she performed at a level that left no doubt about her capability, she unconsciously started undermining herself. Because being seen as capable was more threatening than being seen as imperfect. Being capable meant she'd have to maintain that. Being imperfect meant she could relax. Sarah's direct report, Marcus, noticed the pattern before Sarah did. Marcus had worked with Sarah for 4 years. He'd watched her rise from director to VP. He'd seen her consistency, her attention to detail, her capacity to deliver under pressure. And now he was watching her unravel. Small mistakes that didn't match her capability, missed details she would have caught before, a distraction, an absence, a not quite there-ness that was new. And after the 7th incident, when Sarah forgot about a client meeting she'd scheduled herself, Marcus did something unusual. He asked if they could have coffee, not about work, just coffee. They met at a cafe near the office on a Thursday afternoon. Small talk for a few minutes. Then Marcus said something that would change Sarah's trajectory. He said, "I need to tell you something and I hope you'll hear it. You're sabotaging yourself, not in obvious ways, but in small ways that are adding up. And I think I know why. I think you're doing it because you finally succeeded at a level where you can't explain it away as luck anymore. And that's terrifying you. So you're creating evidence that you're not as good as that board meeting made you look. Because not being as good feels safer than having to maintain being that good." Sarah's first response was defensive. "I'm not sabotaging myself, I'm just dealing with a lot right now. The VP role is demanding. I'm adjusting. These are normal growing pains." But Marcus didn't back down. He pulled out his phone and showed her a document he'd created. A timeline, 7 incidents in 3 months, each one out of character for her, each one lowering expectations slightly, each one creating a narrative that she's struggling. And Marcus said, "This isn't growing pains, this is a pattern. And I'm showing you this because I did the same thing. 3 years ago, when I got promoted to senior manager, I started making mistakes I'd never made before because some part of me didn't believe I deserved the promotion. And it took someone pointing it out for me to see it. So I'm pointing it out for you." Sarah sat in that cafe for 2 hours, at first denying, then deflecting, then slowly admitting. Marcus was right. She was sabotaging, not consciously, but definitely. Every mistake had been preventable. Every miss had been out of character. And underneath all of it was this overwhelming fear that if she performed at the board meeting level consistently, the expectations would become unbearable. People would think she was someone she wasn't. And when she inevitably failed to maintain that level, the disappointment would be crushing. So better to lower expectations now. Better to show them she's not perfect. Better to be seen as good but flawed than excellent and therefore vulnerable to devastating failure. Marcus asked her a question that cut to the core. "What are you more afraid of, failing at this role or succeeding at it?" Sarah didn't have to think long. Succeeding. Because failure she could handle. Failure meant she tried her best and it wasn't enough. That's sad but understandable, explainable. But succeeding meant she was capable all along. Which meant every year she spent doubting herself was wasted. Every time she held herself back was unnecessary. Every moment she felt like a fraud was a lie she told herself. Success would prove she was actually capable. And that proof would require her to own 15 years of self-sabotage, to admit that the obstacle wasn't external circumstances or lack of talent. It was her own fear, her own limit, her own refusal to believe what the evidence kept trying to show her, and that admission felt unbearable. This is the psychological mechanism at the heart of fear of success. It's not about the success itself. It's about what success would require you to admit about yourself, what it would require you to own, what it would require you to grieve. Because if you're capable now, you were capable then. Which means all those years you spent stuck, you were choosing stuck. Not because of circumstances, not because of lack of opportunity, but because of fear of your own capability, fear of the responsibility that comes with owning your power, fear of the expectations that come with performing at your actual level, fear of the exposure that comes with having no excuses left. Sarah cried in that cafe, not polite tears, deep, body-shaking sobs, grieving years of self-betrayal, years of playing small, years of performing incompetence to protect herself from the terror of competence. Marcus sat with her, didn't try to fix it, didn't tell her to stop crying, just sat with her while she felt the weight of what she'd done to herself. And after the tears, after the grief, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Clarity, not about what to do, about what had been happening. She'd been running from her own capability, building elaborate defenses against her own success. And those defenses, those protective mechanisms, they'd kept her safe from exposure, but they'd also kept her small, kept her limited, kept her from ever fully inhabiting her actual capability. The next morning, Sarah did something she'd never done in 15 years of her career. She took a sick day. Not because she was sick, because she needed time to think without the performance, without the pretending. She sat in her home office with a notebook and wrote down every achievement from the last 15 years, every promotion, every successful project, every time someone had praised her work, every moment she delivered beyond expectations. And next to each achievement, she wrote down how she'd explained it away. Got lucky with timing, had a good team. The bar was low that quarter. Someone else deserves the credit. Client was easy to work with. Wasn't really that hard. By the end of the exercise, Sarah had 43 achievements listed, and 43 explanations for why they didn't count as evidence of her capability. Looking at the list, seeing the pattern in black and white was devastating and liberating in equal measure. Devastating because it showed her how thoroughly she'd been discounting herself, how much evidence she'd accumulated and systematically dismissed, how the problem wasn't lack of proof that she was capable. The problem was her refusal to accept the proof. Liberating because once she saw the mechanism clearly, she couldn't unsee it. She couldn't go back to unconsciously dismissing her achievements. She'd have to actively choose to discount them now. And that choice, that consciousness, that changed everything. Sarah had a husband, David. They'd been married for 9 years, and David had watched this pattern play out not just in Sarah's career, but in their relationship. Every time things were going really well between them, every time they had a period of deep connection and happiness, Sarah would create a problem, pick a fight over something trivial, withdraw emotionally, find reasons to be disappointed in him. And David, not understanding the mechanism, would take it personally, would think he'd done something wrong, would try to fix whatever issue Sarah raised. And sometimes in trying to fix it, he'd actually create a real problem. And Sarah would feel validated. See, the relationship isn't perfect. I was right to be concerned. The happiness was temporary. This is the real baseline. That evening, after her day of reflection, Sarah told David what Marcus had helped her see. That she'd been sabotaging not just her career, but their marriage. That every time they got too happy, every time the relationship was too good, she'd unconsciously brought it down. Because sustained happiness felt dangerous, felt like it couldn't last, felt like the universe was setting her up for a bigger fall, so she'd create smaller falls to avoid the big one. She'd generate problems to prove that the good times weren't real, that the baseline was struggle, that comfort and happiness were temporary aberrations that shouldn't be trusted. David sat quietly for a long time after Sarah shared this. Then he said something that revealed he'd been carrying his own wound. He said, "I've known, not consciously, but I felt it. Every time we got really close, you'd pull away, and I'd think it was something I did. Some way I disappointed you, and I'd try harder, be better, fix whatever was wrong, but nothing was ever wrong. Or everything was always a little wrong, and I've been living with this low-grade anxiety for years, never knowing if the good times were real or if you were just waiting to find the flaw. And it's exhausting. Loving someone who won't let themselves be happy." This hit Sarah harder than anything Marcus had said, because she could rationalize self-sabotage in her career as protecting herself, but sabotaging her marriage, punishing her husband for her own fear of happiness, that was different. That was cruel in a way she hadn't intended but couldn't deny, and Sarah realized that the upper limit problem, the thermostat, whatever you want to call it, it wasn't just about career success, it was about life success, about happiness, about love, about all the good things her nervous system had been calibrated to believe she wasn't allowed to have too much of. And every time life exceeded that limit, every time happiness went above the familiar baseline, her system would find a way to bring it back down. Sarah asked David if he'd be willing to help her work on this, to point out when she was creating problems, to call out the pattern in real time. David said yes, but with a condition. He needed her to understand that he couldn't fix this for her. He could point it out. He could support her. But the work of raising her thermostat, of expanding her capacity to tolerate happiness and success, that work was hers alone. He'd been trying to fix it for 9 years by being a better husband, by anticipating her needs, by preventing problems. And all that had done was enable the pattern, made it easier for her to blame circumstances instead of seeing her own hand in it. So he'd help, but differently this time, by being honest instead of accommodating, by reflecting what he saw instead of trying to prevent it. The next Monday, Sarah went back to work with a new commitment. She was going to stop sabotaging, not by trying harder, not by being more careful, but by tracking her upper limit behaviors. Every time she felt the urge to create a problem, to make a mistake, to lower expectations, she was going to pause and ask herself one question. Is this actually necessary, or am I doing this to bring myself back down? And she was going to write down the answer. Not judge it, not fight it, just notice it. Bring it into consciousness. Because Marcus had taught her something crucial. You can't stop a pattern you're not aware of, and you can't change a pattern by fighting it. You change it by seeing it clearly, understanding its function, and choosing differently. The first test came 3 days later. Sarah had a presentation to the executive team. She'd prepared thoroughly. The content was solid, but the morning of the presentation, she woke up with an overwhelming urge to call in sick, to postpone, to say she needed more time to prepare. The old Sarah would have followed that urge, would have created a legitimate-sounding excuse, would have pushed the presentation back and then spent the extra time not improving it, but agonizing over it. But new Sarah paused. She sat with the urge. She asked the question, is calling in sick necessary, or am I doing this to avoid succeeding? The answer was immediate and uncomfortable. She was doing it to avoid succeeding, because if she delivered a great presentation, expectations would stay high. She'd have to maintain that standard. She'd be seen as someone who performs consistently at that level. And that visibility, that expectation, it felt terrifying. So her nervous system was generating an escape route, a way to lower the stakes, a way to return to the familiar level where she was good but not too good, capable but with limitations. Sarah sat with this awareness for 10 minutes, feeling the fear, acknowledging it. And then she got dressed and went to work. Not because the fear went away, but because she chose to do it anyway. The presentation went well, very well. The CEO asked if she'd be willing to present the same content to the board next quarter. And Sarah, feeling that familiar anxiety rising, felt the urge to downplay it, to say she got lucky today, to express doubt about whether she could replicate it. But she caught herself. She recognized the pattern activating, the urge to lower expectations to relieve pressure, and instead of following it, she simply said, yes, I'd be happy to present to the board. No qualifiers, no self-deprecation, no escape hatch, just a simple yes. And her nervous system screamed. Alarms everywhere. You just committed to maintaining this standard. You just agreed to high expectations. You just put yourself at risk of exposure. But Sarah sat with the alarm, breathed through it, and let it ring without responding to it. That night, Sarah told David what had happened, how she'd caught herself trying to sabotage, how she'd chosen differently, how terrifying it felt. And David did something perfect. He didn't celebrate. He didn't praise her for finally getting it right. He just acknowledged how hard it must have been to act against every protective instinct, to stay in the discomfort of high expectations, to not give herself an out. That acknowledgement, that simple recognition of the difficulty, meant more to Sarah than any celebration would have, because it honored the real struggle, not the struggle of doing the work, the struggle of not sabotaging the work. Over the next 3 months, Sarah caught herself trying to sabotage 17 times, each time in different ways. The urge to be late, the urge to forget, the urge to make a small mistake, the urge to create interpersonal drama, the urge to question whether she should even be in this role. Each urge felt legitimate in the moment, felt like a real concern or a real problem. But when Sarah paused and asked the question, "Is this necessary or am I bringing myself down?" the answer was usually clear. She was bringing herself down. And each time she caught it, each time she chose differently, her thermostat expanded by 1 degree. Success became slightly less alarming. High expectations became slightly more tolerable. Visibility became slightly less terrifying. But then something happened that Sarah wasn't prepared for. She got offered a promotion, not to a new role within her company, but to Chief Product Officer at a larger company, double her salary. Equity package worth millions if the company went public. A role that would put her in the top tier of her industry. The kind of role that only a handful of people ever reach. The offer came through a recruiter who'd been following her work, who'd heard about her board presentations, who thought she'd be perfect for this position. And Sarah's first response sitting in that initial call was pure terror. Not excitement, not pride, not satisfaction that her work had been noticed. Terror. Because this wasn't just raising the bar. This was entering a completely different arena. This was going from hidden in the middle of a decent-sized company to visible at the top of a major one. This was success that couldn't be explained away, couldn't be dismissed, couldn't be hidden. Sarah told the recruiter she needed time to think. She hung up, and she immediately started generating reasons why she couldn't do it. The company was in a different industry. She didn't have experience at that scale. The timing was bad. Her current company needed her. She'd be leaving her team in a difficult position. The commute would be longer. The pressure would be intense. What if she failed? What if she got there and couldn't deliver? What if they realized they'd made a mistake hiring her? The reasons piled up, each one reasonable, each one legitimate. And together, they created a convincing case for why she should turn down the opportunity. That evening, Sarah sat down with David and laid out all the reasons she couldn't take the job, all the legitimate concerns, all the real obstacles. And David listened. And when she was finished, he asked one question. If you weren't afraid, would you want this job? Sarah started to answer with more reasons, more explanations about why it wasn't about fear. But David stopped her. Just answer the question. If fear wasn't a factor, if you knew you'd succeed, if you trusted your capability completely, would you want this job? And Sarah, unable to hide behind explanations, answered honestly. Yes. Yes, I'd want it. It's exactly the kind of role I've always dreamed of having. It's the level I've always wanted to reach. If I wasn't afraid, if I believed I could do it, I'd take it in a heartbeat. David said, then you know what you need to do. Sarah said, but what if I fail? What if I'm not ready? What if they're wrong about me? And David said something that shifted everything. He said, what if you succeed? What if you're completely capable of this? What if the only thing stopping you is your refusal to believe what everyone else can already see? What if you take this job and you're great at it? Have you considered that possibility? Have you let yourself imagine what your life looks like if you're actually as capable as this offer suggests you are? Sarah hadn't. She'd spent weeks imagining failure, catastrophizing disaster, visualizing exposure. But she'd never once let herself imagine success, never let herself picture what it would look like to be the chief product officer who belonged there, who performed well, who succeeded at that level. And when David asked her to imagine it, when she actually tried to visualize succeeding, she felt something unexpected, not excitement, grief, deep grief, because if she could succeed at that level now, she could have reached for it years ago. She could have been there already. She'd held herself back, kept herself small, protected herself from her own capability. And all those years, all that potential, it was lost, gone. And she'd been the one who'd stolen it from herself. Sarah cried again, for the third time in 3 months, not because of the decision, because of the realization. She'd been running from her own power her entire life, building walls against her own success, creating limitations that never had to exist. And the real cost wasn't just the external achievements she'd missed. It was the internal experience of living small when she was built for large, of playing at half capacity when she had full capacity available, of being a fraction of herself because being whole felt too dangerous. That was the grief, and until she felt it fully, until she mourned what had been lost to fear, she couldn't fully step into what was possible. 3 days later, Sarah called the recruiter back. She said yes to the interview, not yes to the job, just yes to exploring it. And in the interview, something shifted. Instead of trying to prove she was qualified, instead of performing competence while doubting it internally, Sarah just showed up as herself, talked about her experience honestly, acknowledged what she knew and what she didn't, asked real questions about the role, and for the first time in her career, she wasn't performing, she wasn't pretending, she was just being capable, being honest, being Sarah without the protective layers of self-doubt and self-sabotage. And the interview panel could feel the difference. They could feel they were talking to someone who actually knew herself, who owned her capability without arrogance, who was confident without being certain, who was real. Sarah got the job offer 3 weeks later. And this time, when she read it, she didn't immediately start generating reasons why she couldn't do it. She just sat with it, felt the fear, acknowledged it, and said to herself, I see you, fear. I know you're trying to protect me. I know success feels dangerous. I know visibility feels like exposure. I know high expectations feel like setting myself up for failure. I hear all of that, and I'm doing this anyway, not because I'm certain I'll succeed, but because I'm willing to find out, because I'm done protecting myself from my own capability, because the cost of safety has become higher than the risk of exposure. Because I'd rather try at this level and fail than spend another decade wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to own my power. Sarah started the new role in September, Chief Product Officer at a company with 800 employees and a product used by millions. Her first day walking into the building, she felt like an imposter, not the same imposter feeling she'd had at previous jobs. This was different. This was the imposter feeling that comes when you can no longer hide behind self-sabotage, when you've removed all the escape routes, when you've said yes to the full visibility, and now you have to deliver. This was the imposter feeling of actually trying, of actually showing up at full capacity, and it was more terrifying than any of the smaller imposter feelings she'd experienced before. Her first month was brutal. Not because the work was harder than expected, but because her nervous system was in constant alarm. Every meeting, every decision, every presentation, her brain was screaming that she was about to be exposed, that everyone would realize she didn't belong, that the CEO would regret hiring her, that the team would lose respect for her, that the board would question the decision. The alarm was so constant, so loud, that Sarah could barely hear her own thoughts. She'd be in a meeting making a good point and hear her voice saying the words, while her brain was simultaneously running a disaster scenario about how it would all fall apart. And then came her first real crisis. 6 weeks into the role, the company's flagship product had a critical bug. Customer data was at risk. The engineering team was scrambling. The CEO was demanding answers, and as CPO, this was Sarah's responsibility. This was the moment she'd been unconsciously waiting for. The moment that would prove she didn't belong. The moment that would justify all her years of self-doubt. This was it. The exposure, the failure, the confirmation that she was a fraud who'd fooled everyone until reality caught up. Sarah had two choices in that moment. She could panic, could let the imposter voice take over, could make decisions from fear, could try to deflect blame, could prove through her crisis response that she wasn't actually capable of this role. That would be the old pattern, the safe pattern, the pattern that would bring her back down to familiar territory. Or she could do something different. She could actually lead, not perform leadership while doubting herself internally, but actually step into the role fully and handle the crisis from her capability instead of her fear. Sarah chose differently. She called an emergency meeting. She didn't pretend to have all the answers. She didn't perform certainty she didn't feel. She just created structure, identified what needed to happen, delegated clearly, communicated transparently, made decisions quickly, and most importantly, she owned it. She told the CEO, "This happened on my watch. I'm responsible, and here's how we're fixing it." No deflecting, no excuses, no self-sabotage disguised as humility, just ownership. Clear, direct ownership. And the crisis got resolved. Not perfectly, not without consequences, but resolved. In 48 hours, the bug was fixed, the data was secured, and the customers were informed. And here's what Sarah learned in that crisis. The imposter voice didn't go away when she performed well. It actually got louder, because good performance meant she'd have to maintain that standard, meant expectations would stay high, meant she couldn't hide behind the excuse that she was still learning. She'd just proven she could handle a crisis, which meant the next crisis, she'd be expected to handle it just as well. The imposter voice, which she'd always thought would quiet down once she proved herself, was actually getting louder as evidence of her capability accumulated. Because the voice wasn't about lack of evidence, it was about fear of what the evidence would require from her. After the crisis, Sarah had a one-on-one with the CEO. She expected criticism, expected him to express doubt about her capability, expected him to question whether they'd made the right hire, but instead he said something that caught her completely off guard. He said, "That was excellent leadership. You didn't panic, you didn't deflect, you owned it and fixed it. That's exactly why we hired you." And then he said something that revealed he'd been watching more carefully than Sarah realized. He said, "I can see you're still trying to prove you belong here. I need you to stop. You already belong. The proof is that you're here, that you got this role, that you handled that crisis. Stop trying to prove it and just do the work. The doubt isn't serving you anymore." That conversation shifted something fundamental, because Sarah realized her CEO wasn't waiting for her to prove herself. He already believed she belonged. The only person still needing proof was Sarah. She was the one demanding more evidence. She was the one moving the goalposts. She was the one saying nothing she did was ever enough to confirm she was actually capable. Everyone else had already decided. The market had decided by offering her the role. The CEO had decided by hiring her. Her team had decided by following her leadership. The only person still questioning whether she belonged was her. And that questioning, that constant demand for more proof, it wasn't protecting her. It was exhausting her. Sarah went home that night and told David about the conversation, about what the CEO had said, about the realization that she was the only one still questioning her capability. And David said something that completed the picture. He said, "You know what's interesting? You've been so focused on your imposter syndrome at work that you haven't noticed you've been teaching me to overcome mine. For 9 years, I've watched you achieve things and dismiss them. And I've been doing the same thing in my own career, explaining away promotions, downplaying successes, assuming I got lucky. I learned it from you, or maybe I already had it and your pattern reinforced mine. But watching you work on this over the last 6 months, watching you choose to own your capability instead of deflecting it, it's been changing me too. I've started catching myself discounting my achievements, started asking your question, is this necessary or am I bringing myself down? And it's revealing how much I've been running from my own capability too. This revelation hit Sarah in an unexpected way. She'd been so focused on her own imposter syndrome that she hadn't considered how it might be affecting David, how her modeling of self-doubt and self-sabotage might be giving him permission to do the same. How two people in a relationship, both running from their own capability, would create a dynamic where neither one was allowed to fully shine. Because if one person owned their power, it would put pressure on the other person to own theirs. So unconsciously, they'd been keeping each other small, protecting each other from the terror of full capability, creating a relationship where mediocrity was safe and excellence was threatening. Sarah asked David to tell her about his imposter syndrome, about where it showed up, how it limited him, and David shared a story Sarah had never heard before. 3 years ago, David had been offered a partnership at his firm. It was everything he'd worked toward for a decade, but he'd turned it down. He told Sarah it was because the timing was bad, because the partnership would require too much travel, because he wanted to be more present at home. And those reasons were partly true. But the deeper truth, the one David had never admitted to Sarah or himself, was that he was terrified. Terrified that if he became a partner, if he succeeded at that level, it would expose how much he'd been coasting, how much he'd been hiding behind being talented but not fully applied, how much potential he'd been protecting by never fully trying. And here's what made it worse. David had watched Sarah struggle with her career for years, had watched her doubt herself despite clear evidence of her capability. And part of him had felt superior to that, had thought, at least I don't doubt myself like she does. But the truth was more complicated. David didn't doubt himself the same way Sarah did. He just avoided situations where he'd have to find out. Sarah would take the opportunity and then doubt whether she deserved it. David wouldn't take the opportunity at all. Different strategies, same fear, same running from capability, same protection from the terror of success. Sarah asked David if the partnership was still available. David said no. The moment had passed. They'd offered it to someone else. And David had spent the last 3 years telling himself he'd made the right choice. That partnership would have been too demanding. That he valued work-life balance. That money and status aren't everything. All true statements, but also all convenient justifications for a decision that was fundamentally about fear, about not wanting to find out if he was actually capable of that level of success, about protecting his potential by keeping it theoretical. But here's what had changed. David had been watching Sarah for 6 months, watching her catch her sabotage patterns, watching her choose capability over comfort, watching her expand her thermostat degree by degree. And it had inspired something in him, a willingness to stop hiding, to stop protecting his potential, to actually find out what he was capable of instead of keeping it safely hypothetical. So David told Sarah he was going to have a conversation with his managing partner, not to ask for the partnership again. That ship had sailed. But to say something he should have said 3 years ago. To say I turned down the partnership because I was afraid. Not because of timing or travel, because I was afraid of succeeding at that level. And I want you to know that if the opportunity comes again, I won't run from it. I'm ready now. Not because I'm more capable than I was 3 years ago, but because I'm willing to stop protecting myself from my capability. David had that conversation 2 weeks later, and the managing partner said something unexpected. He said, I knew that was why you turned it down. I could see the fear, and honestly, I was glad you turned it down then, because partnership is hard enough when you want it. It's impossible when you're running from it. But if you're serious now, if you're actually ready to step into that level, we can talk about it, not as a favor, as a real conversation about whether you're ready to own what you're capable of. Because I've seen your work. You've been capable of partnership for 5 years. The question was never ability, it was always willingness. This conversation changed the dynamic in Sarah and David's relationship. Because now, they weren't two people unconsciously keeping each other small. They were two people consciously challenging each other to grow. When Sarah would catch herself starting to sabotage, she'd tell David. When David would catch himself avoiding opportunity, he'd tell Sarah. They became accountability partners in their mutual journey of expanding beyond their upper limits, of tolerating more success than felt comfortable, of owning their capability instead of running from it. 6 months into Sarah's new role, she had to present to the board, her first board presentation as CPO. And the night before, she felt the familiar urge, the urge to get sick, to postpone, to create a problem that would lower the stakes. But this time, instead of fighting the urge alone, she told David, she said, I want to sabotage tomorrow. I want to create a reason to not be at my best, because if I'm at my best, and it works, the expectations will be unbearable. And David didn't try to talk her out of it. He just asked her question, is sabotaging necessary, or are you bringing yourself down? And Sarah, hearing her own question reflected back to her, laughed. She said, I'm bringing myself down, obviously. And David said, so what are you going to do? And Sarah said, I'm going to do the presentation. I'm going to be excellent, and I'm going to feel terrified the entire time. And that's okay. The terror doesn't mean I'm doing it wrong. It means I'm expanding, and expansion is supposed to be uncomfortable. The board presentation went exceptionally well. Sarah was clear, compelling, strategic. She answered difficult questions with honesty and confidence. She owned the wins and acknowledged the challenges. And when it was over, when the board members were praising her work, Sarah felt the urge to deflect, to say it was a team effort, to downplay her contribution, to explain away the excellence. But she caught herself. She recognized the pattern, the urge to bring herself back down after rising too high. And instead of following it, she simply said, thank you. No qualifiers, no deflections, no self-sabotage disguised as humility. Just thank you. And her nervous system screamed, but she didn't respond to the scream. She just let it ring. That night, Sarah had a realization. The imposter voice, the fear of success, the upper limit thermostat, none of it was ever going to fully go away. She'd been unconsciously waiting for the moment when she'd finally believe she deserved her success. When the doubt would disappear, when she'd feel like she belonged without question. But that moment wasn't coming. Because the voice wasn't about deserving, it was about protecting. Her nervous system, calibrated to an old identity, to an old level of safety, would always sound the alarm when she exceeded that level. The alarm would always ring. The only question was whether she'd respond to it, and that realization was both devastating and devastating because it meant she'd never get to relax into unquestioned confidence. She'd always be managing the fear, always catching the sabotage patterns, always choosing capability over comfort. There was no finish line where the work ended. This was the work, forever. But it was also liberating, because if the fear was never going away, then she could stop trying to get rid of it, stop seeing its presence as evidence that she didn't actually belong. The fear wasn't a problem to solve. It was a signal that she was growing, that she was exceeding her old limits, that she was expanding. And expansion always triggers alarm. That's not a bug, that's a feature. That's how you know you're actually growing instead of just thinking about growing. Sarah shared this realization with Marcus, the direct report who'd first pointed out her sabotage pattern. And Marcus shared his own version of the same truth. He said, I've been at this for 3 years. 3 years since I first saw my own upper limit pattern. And I still catch myself trying to sabotage, not as often, not as severely, but it still happens. Every time I reach a new level, every time success exceeds what feels normal, the urge appears to create a problem, to lower expectations, to bring myself back down. And I used to think that meant I wasn't making progress, that I was still broken. But now I understand it differently. The urge appearing isn't failure, it's just information. It's my nervous system saying, this is new territory. This exceeds your calibrated limit. Proceed with caution. And I can acknowledge that information without obeying it. I can say, yes, this is new. Yes, it's uncomfortable. And I'm doing it anyway. This conversation between Sarah and Marcus revealed something important about organizational culture, because Sarah and Marcus weren't the only ones dealing with upper limit problems. Most of the high performers on their team were. Most of the talented people in the company were. They were all hitting invisible ceilings that weren't about capability, but about their internal thermostat for how much success they were allowed to have. And those individual thermostats were creating a collective ceiling, a culture where excellence was praised but also subtly discouraged, where standing out too much made you a target, where playing it safe was rewarded with security even if it meant limiting growth. Sarah decided to do something unusual. She started talking about upper limit problems in team meetings, not as a personal confession, as a leadership topic. She'd talk about catching herself trying to sabotage, about the urge to create problems when things were going too well, about the fear that comes with success. And at first, her team didn't know what to do with this. Leaders weren't supposed to admit fear, weren't supposed to acknowledge self-doubt, weren't supposed to reveal the messy internal process beneath the confident exterior. But slowly, others started sharing too. Started admitting their own patterns, their own fears, their own ways of keeping themselves small, and something shifted in the team culture. People started catching each other's sabotage patterns, started asking each other Sarah's question, is this necessary or are you bringing yourself down? Started challenging each other to own their capability instead of deflecting it. And the team's performance increased, not because people were working harder, but because they were working at their actual level instead of their comfortable level. Because they were bringing their full capability instead of the safe fraction of it. Because they'd made it okay to be excellent without having to sabotage excellence to make others comfortable. 1 year into Sarah's role as CPO, the company hit a major milestone. Product revenue doubled, user growth exceeded projections. The board was thrilled. And Sarah, sitting in that board meeting hearing the praise, felt something she'd never felt before. Not the urge to deflect, not the fear that she'd have to maintain this standard, not the alarm that she was rising too high. She just felt present, capable, real. The imposter voice was still there, still questioning, still suggesting she'd gotten lucky, but it was quieter. And more importantly, she wasn't listening to it. She was listening to the evidence, to the data, to the objective reality that she'd led a team to exceptional results. Not because of luck, not because of circumstances, but because she was actually good at this. That night, Sarah and David had a conversation about what had changed, not just in her career, but in her entire life. And Sarah realized the change wasn't that she'd become more confident. The change was that she'd become more honest. She'd stopped performing, stopped pretending, stopped trying to be either more or less than she actually was. She'd become willing to be exactly as capable as she was. Not arrogant, not falsely humble, just real. And that realness, that willingness to exist without the protective layers of self-doubt or self-inflation, that was the freedom she'd been seeking all along. Not the freedom from fear, the freedom to act despite fear. Not the freedom from doubt, the freedom to succeed despite doubt. Not the freedom from the imposter voice, the freedom to stop obeying it. And here's what Sarah would tell you if you asked her what she learned. She'd say this: "You're not afraid of failure. Failure is familiar, safe, expected. What you're afraid of is success, real success, the kind that would prove you're actually capable. Because that proof would require you to own something unbearable, that you've been holding yourself back, that the obstacle wasn't external, that you've been running from your own power. And owning that is more painful than any failure could be. But it's also the only path to freedom, because you can't become what you're capable of being while pretending you're less. You can't access your full power while protecting yourself from it. You have to be willing to succeed, to own your capability, to tolerate the terror that comes with high expectations, to stay at the level you're afraid you can't maintain. That's the work, not getting confident, but acting despite the lack of confidence, not eliminating the imposter voice, but succeeding anyway while it screams, not raising your thermostat once, but raising it degree by degree, day by day, by choice, until the level that once felt impossible becomes your new normal. That's how you break through. That's how you stop sabotaging. That's how you finally let yourself become what you've always been terrified to discover you actually are: capable, powerful, worthy. Not because you proved it, but because you stopped requiring proof and just started being it.